Hello, I'm Tim Smith from the Adams County Historical Society, and welcome to another rather hot episode of Monuments Monday. And here we are on the summit of Big Round Top. You know, according to the Warren map of the battlefield, we are 666 feet above sea level. Of course, we know that the Warren map had incorrect elevations, and we're actually 786 feet above sea level. You know, the summit of Big Round Top is something that early visitors to the Gettysburg battlefield had on their bucket list. And a huge percentage of visitors that came here climbed to the summit of Big Round Top. That's hard for us to imagine today because, you know, I'm going to estimate that less than 1% of our total visitors come to the summit of Big Round Top, and it's probably a lot less than 1%. John Batchelder, who wrote a book in 1873, Gettysburg and What to See and How to See It, actually stated that when you come to the summit of Big Round Top, the finest view from the summit is towards the south, where the eye stretches away for miles into northern Maryland over an extensive champaign country, giving a beautiful diversity to the character of the scenery. The view to the west and north is obstructed somewhat in midsummer by foliage, although it would be a great pity to cut it away, but the public will soon demand, and all will soon see, that there should be an observatory on this mountain, which would afford a magnificent view not only of the battlefield, but the surrounding countryside. And sure enough, in 1881, a wooden observatory was built on top of Round Top. An article discussing the construction described how the long timbers were hauled up the side of the hill. The wooden tower was 35 feet high to clear the tree tops and must afford views to all points at once far-reaching and enchanting. The Trossel brothers were the carpenters of the observatory. And there was an article about it in the paper when it was completed in the summer of 1881. And they talked about how there was quite a party of workers that had to move and carry the long timbers up the steep hill, and there was a bunch of ladies with refreshments in the course of the construction of the observatory. And we have a photograph of the wooden observatory on top of the hill, which actually sat just behind the camera position. And also, I have a drawing of veterans on top of the wooden observatory from 1882 from one of the illustrated weekly magazines. Now, this tower stood here from 1881 until a more stronger, taller tower was built in 1895, completed in 1896. And that was 60 feet tall, and that tower was here from 1895 until 1968. And people would come to Gettysburg, and people would climb up to the top of the tower, and people would get an awesome view of Gettysburg and the area surrounding it as part of the Gettysburg campaign. And there's lots of photographs of it from different locations. We have lots of close-ups of it here that we'll provide. And in a minute, we'll walk over and see the abutments that you can still see where the tower used to stand. But part of the climb up here was to see the monuments for the regiments that were positioned up here on July 3rd, 1863. This is the monument to the 12th Pennsylvania Reserves, or the 41st Pennsylvania Infantry. And it's kind of interesting. This is, I guess, in elevation, this is the highest monument on the entire Gettysburg National Military Park. And one thing you'll notice is it's in pieces. So you can see that they hauled it up here in pieces and then put it together once it was on top of the hill. And there's an article in the paper about this. It was put up here, I believe, in 1889, dedicated in 1890, and the newspaper mentions another reserved monument was finished last week of the 1st Infantry on the wheat field. Work is in progress on the 12th on the crest of Big Round Top. In hauling this monument, Mr. Roach of the Smith Granite Company accomplished the feat by taking a heavy 6-horse wagon with a 5-ton stone within a few feet of the top, the work being done by tackle, worked by 4 mules, part of the 5th Pennsylvania Reserve, which goes in near the 12th, is here, and the rest of the work is included on other monuments. But can you imagine bringing these stones to the top of Big Round Top using mules and pulleys? And this is part of Fisher's Brigade of the Pennsylvania Reserves that were sent up here on the evening of July 2nd after Vincent's brigade came to the top of the hill and took position on top of this hill. And they were here all day long on July 3rd, and I'm sure were having the time of their life on this hill with a pleasant breeze on a nice summer day. Of course, on top of the hill, we also have the monument for the 5th Pennsylvania Reserves, which is the 34th Pennsylvania Infantry. And we have a monument to the 119th Pennsylvania, and we have, that's from the 6th Army Corps. We have a photograph of the dedication ceremony, and then there's a monument up on top of the hill to the 20th Maine Infantry. This is the position they occupied on the late evening of July 2nd into the early morning of July 3rd as well. And there are flank markers up here on top of the hill to the various units that were involved in the action. And of course, here we are on the summit of the hill, and you can still see the stones for one of the legs of the 1895 60-foot metal observatory that was on top of the hill here. And in this area, the tower stood right here. You can actually find the position of all 4 legs of the tower, and of course it went 60 feet into the air. We have a series of photographs, panoramic views that were recorded from the top of the tower by William Tipton in 1898. One looking towards Little Round Top, one looking out across the area west of Big Round Top, and of course one looking out to the east. So while we're looking at these, let me mention that the tower was torn down in 1968. And of course, you know that I'm fond of telling you that when I was a kid, I did this, or I did that, or I visited this museum, or I saw this when I was a kid. I was never in the Big Round Top Tower. And there's an article in the newspaper where they decided, the Park Service decided to remove the tower in September of 1968. And let me just read one of the comments in the article. The decision to do away with the Big Round Top Tower resulted from a decline in the use of the structure because the long uphill climb exhausted many tourists before they even came near the tower. Oh, so let me get this straight. We ripped out the nice gradual Veterans Trail that had steps on it that led to the top of the tower, which was once the the key, just one of the gemstones of the park. We took that path out. We put in a really steep climb that was very slippery and had a extended, back and forth to get to the top of the hill. And now nobody wants to come up to the tower, so now we tear it down. And I just cannot believe the things that went into this. Can you imagine how it would be if there was a 60-foot tower on Big Round Top today? We can enjoy the view from the top of the tower as people once did. So another thing I wanted to mention, the last thing about the summit of the hill, is there's a really neat article in the Gettysburg newspaper in 1932, and it says, the observatory on Big Round Top was a scene of a midnight wedding on Monday. Two people, one from Virginia and the other from Westminster, got married at midnight on top of the tower in July of 1932. Well, again, thanks for watching, and if you really like the content we supply on our YouTube channel, please like and subscribe. So the heat's getting to me. I don't know how disconcerted that might have been.